Welcome to Talk Commerce. I'm Isaac Morey, and this week's episode features Tim Tynan, the CEO of Chargeback Gurus. They're a company that helps merchants deal with disputes, cut down on fraud, and recover lost revenue. Tim explains how every chargeback tells a story, what Visa's new VAMP program means for merchants and for banks, and how AI is starting to change the way that disputes get handled. What stands out to me the most in today's episode, though, is Tim's take on subscription businesses and how doing things like providing reminders about upcoming renewals and giving customers clear opt-outs is crucial, not only for compliance, but for providing good, sustainable customer service. Without further ado, let's jump right into today's episode.
Welcome to this episode of Talk Commerce. Today I have Tim Tynan. He is with Chargeback Gurus. Tim, do an introduction for yourself. Tell us your day-to-day role and one of your passions in life.
Okay, well, thank you, Brent. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be with you and your listeners. And yes, I'm Tim Tynan. I'm the CEO of Chargeback Gurus. We are a company that helps merchants, other companies with the dispute process. We help them manage that for credit card disputes, working with all the different players like Visa and MasterCard and the banks, both on the issuing side that provide like credit cards for you and me, and also the banks on the merchant side. And we help them manage that process to resolve disputes. I'm a person that's been in the industry for many decades, working with a number of players like Bank of America and Citigroup. And anyway, glad to be with you today, Brent. So what do I have a passion for? Well, I mean, I definitely have a passion for my family. And I guess I would say as a hobby, baseball, a Yankees fan and enjoy sports.
Yeah, I mean, our interview was going so good. And then you had to mention the Yankees. Geez, no, we'll move on. We'll move on from there. I'm a Twins fan, which is a tough one. It's probably worse being a Vikings fan or a Mets fan, right? Mets, whatever.
I was a Herbie Puckett fan for what it's worth.
Yeah, he was great. And I know the Mets got Santana back in the 90s. Let's not talk about baseball, but I'm also a baseball fan. So, all right. But all right, before we get started, though, you have graciously volunteered to be part of the Free Joke Project. I'm just going to tell you a joke. All you do is give me a rating 8 through 13. So here we go. If your mother-in-law starts giving you parenting advice, tell her, hang on a minute. I live with one of your kids and they never listen.
Well, I got to tell you that hits home with me because I have a terrific mother-in-law. I was with her last night, and it's true. It's true. So listen, how can I give you anything less than the best, Brent? You're a 13 all the way.
All right, awesome. All right, so how do you make? What's my first question? And I've been in the industry for a long time as well. How do you make chargebacks exciting? How do you engage a merchant and say, listen, we got to talk about chargebacks?
Well, one thing we like to say, which is really true when you think about it, is that every chargeback tells a story. And if you really dig into it, if you investigate it, a dispute, right? Disputes have happened since the beginning of, mankind. Cavemen had and cave women had disputes. And so right till today, when you think about it, there's detail behind it. What happened behind that? What about the transaction? What kind of industry was it? What kind of amount was it? Who did the purchasing? Why is there a dispute? Was it an error? Was it some fraud? So it tells a story. And if you dig into it, you do find that story behind it.
So Chargeback Gurus suggests that you've niched down into the market, right? And I remember as an e-commerce manager talking to the people that helped you save money on shipping, and so I'm assuming you help and consult with merchants to relieve some of the stress on chargebacks. Is that correct?
We do, and it's a complicated process, or it can be. And so part of our job is to simplify it for a merchant to help them work through that process. At the end of the day, the important thing is the right information gets to the right people to make the right decision. So you have banks involved on one side, you have merchants involved, you have the consumer. There's different parties, Visa and MasterCard. There's certain rules associated with protecting consumers so that they have rights on a dispute, and clearly the merchant needs help with that too. So that is what we do. We help manage that process and get to the right decision.
And is there specific areas in chargebacks that are common that merchants maybe overlook? And I'm thinking, I've done chargebacks in the past, and part of it is you just can't get a hold of anybody, and you get so frustrated as a consumer, you're just like, okay, I'm just going to call Visa and dispute the charge. Is there a punch list of items that you recommend right off the bat to help them in that process?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a consumer, the best thing and the first thing I would always do is call the merchant, call the store, or if it's an online, find the process, whether it's an 800 number or whether it's through email, but go to the merchant. That's the first thing to do, and explain your issue, and oftentimes they can resolve it. But if you can't, there's other outlets too. Again, it's the bank that issued your credit card. You can call the number on the back of your card. Visa, MasterCard have numbers and help desks as well. So there's multiple places to go to get a resolution. But once you you shouldn't have any trouble finding somebody. You call one of those numbers, somebody's going to pick up. You start the process, and it's typically a 180-day process from beginning to end, and oftentimes are resolved in days, not weeks or months. But you kick off that process, and that's really the investigative piece. It's to gather the information and to make the right decision. And that's where we play. We help merchants with that part.
What you mentioned VAMP earlier in our green room conversation. Tell us about the VAMP program and how that's impacting merchants and consumers.
Sure. So Visa just announced something called the VAMP, right, which is the Visa Acquirer Monitoring Program. And these are industry terms. An acquirer is a bank essentially that acquires the credit card or debit card or gift card, whatever the card transaction is, and helps do the clearing and settlement of the monies that need to go between you as a consumer with your credit card that you purchase something with, and the other side of that transaction with the bank for the merchant to assume that they get their funds for the goods and services they provided. And but the Visa Acquiring Monitoring Program is replacing something that Visa had before. They had a program called the Visa Dispute Management Program, which was about chargebacks. And they also had something called the Visa Fraud Management Program, which is just about fraud, the true fraud, a fraud that happens from bad guys abusing the system. And so it's Visa's trying to simplify these two programs, bring them together on the one ratio that both a merchant needs to manage to, and both an acquiring bank needs to manage to, and to keep those ratios low as it relates to total transactions. And it's all about reducing fraud and reducing chargebacks, and it's really meant to protect consumers, but also it protects people like the merchant as well.
From the fraud standpoint, I know there's a number of companies like Signify and these other that help up front to relieve or to kind of weed out those things.
Right.
Is there good best practices that you recommend to make sure that you're not even getting to the point of having a fraudulent card that's being used on your website and then somebody's going to do a chargeback?
Yeah, if you're a merchant, there definitely is. Right up front, it's making sure that like a consumer understands terms and conditions. Making sure that you've got documentation for that transaction. There are things like, merchants have things like account verification, address verification. That those little 3 numbers on the back of your credit card, the CVV. All those things ensure that the right person, that a legitimate person is making that transaction, not a fraudster. So there are clearly things like that. And you mentioned like Signify, Riskify, those are good companies that provide some merchants with a scoring mechanism to make decisions that this is a good transaction, this is not a good transaction, you can accept it, you can ship the goods. So that's part of sort of fraud management. Chargeback Gurus plays a specific role after the transaction to help with the dispute piece. And the banks play a role in making the decisions about adjudicating that dispute. So, they're different players and all play a role.
Hey there, Isaac here again. Quick break from the show to talk about something that might just become your new favorite sales tool, case studies. At Content Cucumber, we specialize in turning your best client success stories into compelling, SEO-friendly content that also drives conversions. We handle the interviews, the writing, the strategy, everything, start to finish. You get a polished case study that helps you close deals, train your team, and stand out from the competition. If you're ready to show, not just tell, what makes your service great, head over to gotcontent.io/case studies to learn more. Link in the bio. Now, back to Talk Commerce.
In your role, there's a threshold that merchants have to meet, right? There's a threshold that they can't have so many chargebacks. So is part of your role making sure they're under that threshold? And then does it mean eventually you might work yourself out of a job, or is there always going to be these chargebacks?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's true. If we're doing a good job, we're helping to reduce chargebacks. Now, of course, part of what we do is we manage the process and we help a merchant recover revenue from that chargeback, or the consumer, if they should get a refund. So there's no doubt if we're doing a really good job, we're helping to reduce chargebacks. But there's always going to be disputes too. So there's a need for both. There's a need for somebody to manage the process, and clearly reducing chargebacks is the right thing. This new VAMP program has changed the ratios. They typically, in the past, they were about 1%. So you wouldn't want more than 1% of your total transactions to end up as a chargeback. The same was true with fraud. You wouldn't want anything above 1% of fraud of your total transactions. And with the new program, again, they combine those two ratios, the fraud ratio, chargeback ratio. And the numbers have changed a little bit. There's a little more generous room for a merchant. The program next year, 2026, when it's fully rolled out, goes to about 1.5% for a merchant. But for the acquirer, again, the bank that's taken that transaction to clear and settle, as I mentioned before, their number is now 0.7. So there's more responsibility with VAMP being shifted to the acquiring bank to ensure that they're monitoring fraud and they're helping to reduce chargebacks. So both still have responsibility, but those numbers have changed slightly.
One of my biggest frustrations as a consumer is the subscription model, where you subscribe, they get you to pay for a year in advance, and you forget, you don't even use the service anymore, and then suddenly you get this big charge. Is there some rules around that the merchants have to give you some, they have to give you first an idea that this is going to happen the next month, and then is there a point in which they give you that charge and then you're like, no, I don't want this, I want to cancel right now? There must be some rules around that, and there must be some ways you help coach merchants to make that process better.
Yeah, that's a really great question, because I think best practice with a good merchant that has a subscription business not only has very good communication up front about the business rules, if you will, to do business with them, but also the opt-out capability that you can opt out of that subscription anytime you want, and it should be easy to do. Apple is a good example of that. On your Apple iPhone, if you subscribe to things through Apple, it's part of the settings. You can go in and unsubscribe anytime that you'd like. So having the ability to unsubscribe is very important. Having that opt-out capability is important. That's one of the rules that, in the dispute process would be part of the information that would be shared with the bank and also the consumer, whether they did opt out. And that would be a best practice.
How about when a consumer, let's go back just to the subscription model again. So the idea is that you're helping the merchant to reduce it, but is there a way that you can help them to almost eliminate it, other than what you've already said about about the opt out, and is there a best practice that you recommend in there from a merchant standpoint who has like a SaaS model that's doing a service rather than a product?
Yeah, it's definitely about information and education. I mean, there's no doubt that the more simple you could make it for a consumer, if you're in a subscription business, again, opt out to me is table stakes. That should be always offered. Um, but reminders. It could be constant reminders too. It could also be little pop-up screens about education. Now, there's that balance if you're in business. Obviously businesses want to increase the acceptance of their credit card payment. They want people to have access and use of whatever their subscribed service might be, whether it's streaming service or some sort of periodical information, or maybe even to a podcast. There's all different, of course, things that people want to take advantage of and use. So there's the balance between that. There's the consumer protection, opting out, education's important. There's the business or merchant wanting to have higher acceptance rates and clearly be able to provide their service in an easy, frictionless way. So I think best practices are the ones I've seen have a lot of education, make it very simple to use. It could be pop-ups that you can get off the top of a screen. It could be reminders every time you reuse it. It could be a monthly reminder, for example, too. That is also a best practice.
Switching the gears a little bit to AI, in the communication process, more and more merchants are switching to a bot on their website. And I can just say, from my experience with a SaaS player, I got put into a loop, and I actually canceled my subscription because they've removed the human from the customer experience. How much are we seeing a shift from removing humans in that, and then the increase in retention for clients, or even chargebacks, because of this shift to more of a bot version of customer service?
Yeah, that's also interesting topic. It's new ground, obviously. What early days you're seeing with AI is in the customer service area, where a bot's helping to answer questions or provide information. There's no doubt people are using AI also for decisioning. For example, we do at Chargeback Gurus. We've got these machine learning algorithms that we built that really help with providing information in a more effective and efficient way, and then help with decisioning about whether a dispute should be continued to be investigated or not, or just a quick decision can be made. But you're talking about something interesting too, like agentic AI, where bots might actually help with the purchase process. I think it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think that people have figured that out yet. I think there's still rules to be decided. I personally wouldn't have an agent buy for me, but maybe I'm not the typical purchaser too. I think there's always going to be both too, to be honest with you, Brent. And as it relates to the dispute process, it's all about the information. Like if you subscribed and you gave authority for this process to take place, well, that's something that's going to be part of the the decision process on who made the right choice of decision there. But what I think is best practice too, and I'm a technology guy by training too. I worked for IBM for a long time before I got into banking and payments and ultimately things like merchant processing and now chargeback management. From a technology perspective, it was always best practices to have both. You want to leverage things like AI. You want to leverage these large language models and the data that's out there. But you want to leverage it in a way that's useful to the company, the business, and also provides some value to the consumer. But it's never one without the other, from my perspective. Even in our business, we have experts that do the things that we do and provide value to our merchants, and we leverage some of the best technology. So it's a combination of both. But it'll be interesting to see where these bots end up in the future, these avatars and people that look, like cartoon versions of Tim Tynan or Brent Peterson and actually do more than just give you information. So a lot to be seen in the future there.
You've brought up an interesting point about the AI, the agentic commerce bots, and that really makes a really good play for the chargeback bot to resolve it, right? So somebody that's really they're focused, a thing or an entity that's there to focus to get it done, and they're always coming back to you to say, here's what we need. And we probably already kind of do that with sequences and some other of the automations that are in the process, but I do imagine in the future that there'll be this sort of like the automated voice or automated bots that you see on websites that are helping to resolve that, even with voice or having, there's all kinds of ways to do it. But I would imagine that that's a really good application that could go out and find all the information, come back and help you as a merchant to, and as the bank to resolve the chargeback situation.
Yeah, I think there's a role for it. There's no doubt. And like I mentioned, we're already leveraging, AI and some best practices with machine learning. But by the way, I was just thinking as you were saying that, there's a good joke probably out there. Two bots walk into a bar, and one's got this and one's got that. I'm sure you'll have that in a future program. But I actually, from my perspective, it's you can't, the expertise, the specialties, the people knowledge, the history knowledge that people have with working in the industry. That's always going to be really important for at least our clients. I don't see where we'd have a bot do our job. I could see where it's enhancing it, it's augmenting it, and it has specific tasks and roles. And one of the reasons for that is it's really important that the information is 100% accurate, and of course we know AI has hallucinations today, and it's a great tool, but it's based on the data that's available, and it makes mistakes. And so that's why a combination of using it more for efficiencies, effectiveness. I mean, we use it for like quality control too. We'll use it to make sure, do we have the right information? Do we have the right evidence? Have we done the investigative work? Is the quality of the documentation that we have to pass to somebody else even readable? I mean, that doesn't sound like AI, that sounds like basic technology, but it's leveraging large language models as well in the data. So there's a combination of both that I think is the realistic approach today. I think people are also running towards AI because ChatGPT just made it more consumable. It made it more easy for people to get information. And so that people are running towards that to apply it to every walk of life. Every company has got different people focused on AI projects. And my advice to anybody, again, as a technology guy, from years past when IBM helped create some of the technologies people are leveraging today, is it's a combination of both. And you really want to make sure it's practical and it's used the right way. And I think some of the early players are trying to do that. I know we are.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point about machine learning and AI. And machine learning has been around for years, and Watson and IBM have been in this game for a very long time, doing exactly what now we're doing as consumers. But maybe AI is the democratization of that machine learning and allowing more people to participate in it. Tim, we have a few minutes left. As I close out the podcast, I give everybody a chance to do a shameless plug about anything they'd like. What would you like to plug today?
Well, thank you for that. Well, listen, Chargeback Gurus is a great company. I'm honored to be part of it. We have some talented people. We have some really terrific clients too. Some of the largest companies on the planet are our clients, and we can help a merchant with dispute management. We've got expertise, we've got data, we've got some best-in-class technology. I already mentioned something about AI and machine learning, but we can help merchants. So if you're listening to this and you've got a fraud problem or a chargeback problem, we're the place to go look at. We can easily be found on the website, chargebackgurus.com. And anyway, Brent, I appreciate that shameless plug. I didn't expect that, so thank you for that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So last question, do you remember Roger Clemens as a Boston Red Sox or as a New York Yankee?
Oh, well, I remember him as both because he was a fierce competitor. And of course, I remember that game that he pitched where He was hurt and there was blood in his socks, and he was still pitching. And when I was with the Red Sox, but I was happy to see him join the Yankees. So both, yeah.
And I can say that I saw him in the playoffs. The Twins would often come against the Yankees and lose in the very first round of the playoffs. So I've seen him live at what was the Metrodome, the Yawn Dome. But yeah, anyways, Tim, it's been such a great conversation. Tim Tynan is the CEO of Chargeback Gurus. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Brent. Appreciate it.
Talk Commerce is a production of Content Basis, LLC. For more creative content, go to contentbasis.io.